Hello and welcome to the studio. I'm Lee Sellers and we're going to be discussing how to win customer attention in the hybrid world. First of all, Sarah, can I ask you, how have your customer habits and behaviours changed in the last couple of years?
Well, I think they've changed in the same way that society's habits have changed in the last few years. We can no longer rely on somebody working 9 to 5. We can no longer rely on them being in the location that they might purport to be. We can no longer rely that they've got an attention span that will allow it to last an hour or 30 minutes. So we have to be able to have content that I think's ready to be consumed when customers are ready to consume them through the channels that they're working for. And it needs to be more valuable and eye-catching than I would suggest than ever before.
In the B2B market space, we are in the complex buyer groups that we're operating with. And I think some of those changing behaviours that we're seeing is that these buyer groups need to actually convince other people on the board. And I think there's more demand to say, help me to bring that into my organisation, to sell to my board, to show the value, to actually go and show that we're relevant in terms of what we're delivering and how we actually create a return on investment from it. So I think it's changed in some way that there are new demands on us in terms of helping members of the board to convey and bring that value across in an environment where we're not sitting around the table, we're not having coffee with everybody. And you have to remember, many of these board members have joined during this time, so they don't have the same level of intimacy with the other board members. So I think we're seeing a change in what people are demanding to go and drive value into their business.
I kind of smile because a lot of our journey as marketing leaders, probably up to the pandemic, was probably trying to get our teams to get more digital, right?
Yeah.
And we laugh now because it's kind of, okay, that's done, right? We think about it very passionately in the terms of a buyer's journey, that these individuals or buying groups are interacting with us with the intention of coming along with us, getting to know us and buying something. I think the reality is, we all have to accept as marketers is no one cares about all of this. Our customers and prospects don't care. They don't think like that. They don't think, right, I'm now on a voyage of discovery with, in my case, VMware or where the company have been at. No one cares about that. So we have to continue to make sure that we are using those right signals in the right way. We can. The beauty of, I think, B2B marketing now is we can collect and analyze and synthesize any amount of data, but really it's trying to get to that human element of, is this a real intention from someone wanting to, it's like a cry for help that they want to buy our solution. So that is the big challenge, just taking all this digital content. People are much more willing in a predominantly more digital world to interact with data than maybe 5 years ago, or definitely 10 years ago, when it was seen as a strong intent signal. Mm-hmm. And that is our challenge, is how do we go through all this digital noise and all this engagement noise to drive that forward?
It's not just about the buyer centre, it's also the fact they have to educate people who don't understand the benefits of whatever it is that we're trying to market. And we have to start talking in business benefit terms, and we have to be a lot more overt than I think we've ever had to be in the past. It's not good enough just simply to talk about the benefits. It has to be also talking about the benefits to the organisation of being able to implement and the value that the organisation should be able to receive. And that, for me, is an evolution in the last 2 years, because before that, people perhaps understood, or the buying groups weren't so large. You didn't have to go into that broader education at a board or a business level.
Relevance is the thing that trumps it, because the world's become very noisy, but also the barriers to entry have become very low. So all of a sudden you have somebody coming in from another country, from a different market, from a different industry, and literally eating your lunch. And they may show up and look like a big, sophisticated organisation, but could be a one-person band sitting there doing it in a country that's not local. So relevance to me is the real challenge. How do we show up at the right time with something that's of interest, positioned directly for the person, for the individual, but positioned for something for their industry and for their company? And how do we get to know and understand that individual and have a level of intimacy that understands the type of things they need, and by the way, when they need them? Because if you turn up at the wrong time, we also know it doesn't work. So relevancy to me is the single word that I put forward that's changed our work.
Yeah, I think the data for me is the key part. It's really interesting because you both touched on, making it relevant and personal. And as you were both saying this, there was the French side of me, and I should declare I am French, right?
C'est bon.
There was the French side of me saying, please, 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 without being spooky. And because I think that's a fine line we tread, and often we don't do it very well. I certainly get very emotional about people knowing too much about me, having too much information, and then it's a complete turn off. That you lose me almost immediately.
If somebody helps you find a parking space, you're delighted.
Yeah.
If somebody uses the same data to give you a parking ticket, you're not so pleased. So I think it depends how the data's being used. Give me value, I'm happy to accept it.
Yeah. Data regulation is part of what we have to deal with as marketers, right? There is a ton of changes coming up, right? And I think we're not entirely sure what those changes are, how they're going to affect us. I think maybe as marketers, and I take myself as an example, we don't look at this proactively enough. We kind of wait for the legislation to appear, and then suddenly we all start in panic thinking, wow, are we going to do our jobs? But I think that's a big unknown, right? What's going to come next? How are we going to have to deal with this data? And then if you add on to this what you brought in, which is what's happening with AI and the new tools that are going to be available to us, that's wow. So I think it is incumbent on all of us, though, to be incredibly proactive about understanding how is data likely to be used going forward. And then, as marketers, we've got to go and speak to our legal counterparts. We've got to go and speak to our chief digital officers, chief data officers, if we've got them, if we're lucky enough to have them within our organizations.
I think transparency is something that we need to think about. Not just governance, not just what's mandated on us, but how do we make some of this stuff transparent? How we're using data, the decisions that we're making in AI. How do we make sure that we haven't got bias in the AI? If you're teaching a system for one set and you don't bring in a mix, then you're not going to have inclusivity. You're going to have a biased AI system making decisions that maybe aren't acceptable to us in society. But it is about making sure that you have the systems there that can enable people to deliver the value of AI fast, with data sets that they own as opposed to being owned out there in the general environment, so that you maintain and keep that proprietary value, and then having the right controls and governance built in. So you need a platform, you need a tool set to build it on that manages it through, but you also need the governance and controls in place.
Coming back to the topic for the discussion, which is sort of the hybrid world, I personally think we're in a transition phase right now in terms of how people are working. I think we rebounded back from the pandemic, which in itself was a transitional phase. I don't think this is it. I don't think this is how we're going to be working in the next 5 to 10 years, but I don't know what that is. So for us as marketers, it keeps us young, I guess. That's what I like about it. It keeps us on our toes, because we're likely to have to change our strategies again the next few years, because the way in which companies work is going to change.
Generationally, it's quite interesting, because when I talk to sort of a lot of Generation Z, and they're like, well, I work 9 to 5, and anything more than that is my choice to give the company. Which, wow. And like, wow, you're blowing my mind. I grew up in a recession where if you had a job, you just stayed there till they kicked you out. Because
till midnight.
Yeah, if you had to, because you were scared to. I think recession's going to come into that a little bit more, and that will drive people's need. If they're desperate for a job, sadly, they might work in a different way or conform to different norms.
So the last question that we've already touched on with John is hybrid working here to stay?
Absolutely, emphatically, yes.
Yes.
And if there's one reason why I'm so confident about the yes, is because that's the first question I get asked at interview before salary.
Oh, wow.
This is now by the new generation. Now, during the pandemic, I was one of actually those really awkward people who had to shield. So I shielded for 2 years. And it's opened my eyes. So, and by shielding, I should say, I did not leave my house for 2 years. But it suddenly made me realize that there was an opportunity for hugely talented people to be awesome at their job without having to go into the office. Think about people who physically cannot move because they've got a body impairment, because of whatever. And suddenly those people have got amazing opportunities. And then there's something that really touched my heart earlier in one of the sessions we listened to. And I'm sorry, I cannot remember the name of the speaker. But she said, most of the new people they hire, the young people, they are remote first because they cannot afford. Based in South Africa, young people do not have enough money to come into it. And do you know what? This is what I've learned. So I'm excited because it gives lots of opportunities to people who wouldn't necessarily have those opportunities.
Those are such good points, that you can get completely new talent that was not available before.
Utterly. And then the final thing, which is beautiful in all of this, is it actually helps with the environment, right? There's less commute. There's less traffic. There's less need for large offices that are empty. So, gosh, I'm super excited. I think it's sad that it came as part of COVID because that was pretty hideous. But actually, I see this as a real positive thing.
We kind of all travelled through this journey in the same storm, but we've been on different boats. And as we've gone through the storm, I think there are different learnings. So the personal experiences that you've had in terms of where it's been and it's unlocked, the opportunities, I think, with the new generation, and I think some of the noise out there, I recognise these challenges. And I think the technology begins to provide some more of the answers towards them. But we need to think about how we put those in place so that we're, again, I go back to the word relevant, so that we're relevant to our people, as well as being relevant to our clients as we think about the marketing we're doing. So, but we do need to think about culture. We do need to think about bringing new people on board. So we've got to balance some of these things to remain relevant and to cut through some of the noise that's out there right now.
Good.
What he said.
Well, thank you very much. Well, I think that wraps it up nicely. And we've talked about customers, customer journeys, and hybrid working, which has brought a whole new light to hybrid working for me. So thank you all very much. That's all from the studio for now.